Hi, Susan. How are you today?
Hi, Seal. It's nice to see you. It's a beautiful pre-fall day here. I'm so happy to have the cooler weather.
Same here in southeastern Pennsylvania. I'm thrilled to tell you that I took a beautiful walk this morning,
Nice.
and it looks like it's going to be a beautiful day for the next several days. So we're enjoying this for a change.
Yeah, and we're recording this in the morning, so it's nice that we're still fresh, we
Yeah,
haven't not the end of the
yeah,
day.
right. We try to do this early for that exact reason.
So today, it's going to be in my workroom sewing with Susan. Uh, and it's just a potpourri of different tips and ideas that I have in my daily workroom life and things that people have asked me. So I have students,
Yeah,
common things that students ask me, or just little things that happened this week, like changing the serger thread is one of the things because I had to do that this week. So I just
yeah,
filmed it.
that's
And you never
awesome.
know what's going to be new or interesting to someone. So it's going to be, you don't have any idea what I'm showing.
I
So
don't.
it'll
I'm
be fun.
usually well prepared because you've sent me notes, and this is a big surprise to me. So I'm looking forward to it, especially because you showed a photo earlier this week of the serger thread with like a wisp going around. I was like, man, that is good luck. And I had been doing some serger on my home serger this week. Those of you who have listened to any podcasts or read the newsletter for the library know that my older daughter's getting married in just a couple weeks. So it's been busy in my workroom.
Yeah.
Um, and I had my personal serger out, my home serger, and I had it right next to my industrial serger. I turned to look and I went, oh, I'm going to have to change the threads on that. I forget to look at the thread sometimes. I just sit down and go to work. So this is very timely for me. I'm very curious to see if your method is different from mine.
Well, it's not anything new. But here at Workroom Tech, when I see the thread getting low, I tell the students, if you're the one that makes the thread go go out, you're buying everybody drinks at the end of class because
Exactly.
because I'm the one that's gonna have to thread it.
So I
It's
can't wait
fun.
to see this though, because I feel like this is one of those things we do it the same way all the time. Then we see how somebody else does it. And we go, oh, I like that idea. So I'm curious.
Okay, so let me share my screen.
Okay, great.
And get these videos up. And another reason that you don't know what I'm sharing today is because I just edited the videos over the weekend. Got a little bit going on with Custom Workroom Conference starting. So
Just a little bit. For
yes,
those
yeah.
of you who think we have it all under control all the time,
I've been spinning
surprise.
plates like crazy and I'm not good at
Yeah.
that. All right. So here's the first video and changing the serger thread. Okay, we're down to just a little bit there. Putting on the new serger thread. And I'm tying together the two ends in a square knot. So this takes longer probably than the whole process
Right.
because the thread is so thin. And I use the Maxi Lock or that type of serger thread.
Mhm.
It's a
I
nice
do
thin
too.
thread and I really like the way it sews. So, and then once you sew that square knot, leave long tails and test it to make sure it's not slipping because it will
Yes.
slip a little bit before it gets to the end. Now I'm marking that knot area with a marker so I can watch it go through the machine.
Oh, I never thought to do that. See, I knew I would learn something.
Well, this is a looper too. So the loopers are harder underneath, are harder
Yes.
than the top threads. All right, so I wound it back up so that you can kind of see it there on that spool.
Mhm.
And then you just sew it off. And I'll see that blue mark come, there it
Oh,
goes.
yeah.
And then go slower. And there it is. Easy peasy.
Susan, I did learn something new.
All
I
right,
mean, not
here's the
tie it.
slow-mo.
I love it. I see it shooting down into the looper.
It's like a sports thing. And now the
Yes.
slow-mo.
Play of the day.
Yes, this is the play of the day.
That's awesome.
There it goes. Yeah. But the square knot works really well for that. So
Yes.
if you just tied a big thick knot, it wouldn't go through your needle. And if it was a thicker thread, it probably wouldn't go through the needle.
Okay, so I do have a question about that. I've tied the threads. I did not realize I could sew it off without fabric in it. I've
Oh,
always loosened the threads and pulled them through, which sometimes leads to one of them breaking, by the way, just in case anybody's interested. I didn't know I could sew it off.
yeah. Chain it off. Just
Okay.
keep chaining and till you see that marked thread come through, and then you're ready to go. And if it does not make it through the needle, then all you have to thread is that part.
I was
So
gonna say you're
it's still
right there. So,
better. Yeah,
yeah.
it's still better than the whole thing.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Especially on the
All right.
lower threads. All right, so the next one is a mitered corner hem, and I'm sharing this because I've been talking about shower curtains with some folks lately, and this is how I like to finish my shower curtain corners at the
Okay.
top when I'm doing buttonholes or grommets, so that I don't have that bulky side hem
Right.
where I want to put a buttonhole.
Mhm.
Also, I like to do this on Roman shades. When I want to have the same reveal of fabric around the whole shade, I'll do
Okay.
a mitered bottom corner hem. So here we go. And this is a 2-inch hem, and I've pressed 2 inches over. And then unfold that. And you're going to mark whatever you folded your hem 2 inches from that fold line from the corner. So that's one reason why you press it first, just so you get all those crease lines to follow.
Mhm.
And I have on my Home Deck Gal website, I do have instructions for how to do this
Okay.
for making like napkins. It's a smaller hem. And you can make a template if you want to cardboard template to sketch around. But so now I bring those together, and that's where I'm going to sew. And you can pin that if you want. I just go to the machine and stitch. I'm going to show you one more time from the other side. And that's folded over, cut edges together, and there's that square
Okay.
you're going to sew. And then after you sew it, then you'll cut away, leave it into about 1/4 inch seam allowance. You clip off the little point on the end.
That's always the scary part, isn't
I
it?
know, it is. And then turn right sides out. Another good thing about pressing all this hems first, especially if you're doing something like a Roman shade, is you want to have all your edges nice and square
Right.
before you sew your mitered corner. And that gives you those crease lines to follow.
Oh, look how nice that is.
Yeah, it's so satisfying. If
Yes.
I'm having a bad day, maybe I'll, just like grab some scraps and sew a mitered corner. It'll just make your day better.
So what is that term, that people like to just it's soothing to watch?
Right,
Uh,
right, right. Yeah.
I don't remember what the term is, but these are the kind of things I could watch all day long if I was having a stressful day. Like, to me, that is just like, just how crisp and beautiful it turns out. I love that.
So this is a compensating foot, and that'll give me a nice edge to follow. The toe on the right is higher
Yes.
and springed than the toe on the left. And this is a 1/8 compensating foot. So I'm sewing 1/8 inch in from the edge. And there you go. So that, like an unlined shower curtain, that makes just such a nice corner at the top.
Beautiful.
Come over and get that buttonhole over near the end.
Right.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So that's one of my favorite corners to do. And you also could put lining inside of that. So that's what I do with Roman shades. I'll finish off those bottom corners, and then all the linings get
Fits
tucked
inside.
under those. Yeah, fits inside. And then you can finish your hems. You don't have to top stitch it. It could be hand sewn, or you could use do fixed board and fixed tape or something like
Mhm.
that.
Okay.
Makes a really pretty edge. You could also use that miter corner if you were making something like a bed scarf, placemats, table runners,
Right.
where one fabric's on the back, and then you put a decorative fabric and let those corners come over and create a banding. And
Right. Oh, that would be really pretty.
yeah, and I think it also works for pillow shams if you wanted the back to wrap to the front and have a
Mhm.
banding around and then top stitch around the inside. So
Right.
there's once you learn that method, you can use it for a lot of things.
Yeah.
You know, if you want to make a wedding gift or, you know, your daughter's getting married, napkins, cloth napkins are really beautiful. So
Wait,
you can,
let me add a few more things to my list.
oh no, it's a little too late for that.
It is
The
actually.
next one is pulling a thread, and we do this in class when we have fabrics that we can pull a thread and we need to pull a thread. And my favorite way to do it is to pull and cut at the same time. So that's what I'm going to show here.
Okay.
So I've cut one little beginning snip there, and I'm pulling out the thread. And this is a plain weave. So it means the warp yarns and the weft yarns are equal. And then it's pulling that thread and cutting little slices while holding that thread taut.
Right.
And you have to use a nice sharp pair of scissors, but you can do it with practice. The If it's a fabric that has a really slubby thread, you might not be able to do this because it's going to
Right.
be thin. But a fabric like this, and even silk and even sheer, you can pull and keep that thread taut while making little
Right.
slices as you go. And that way you're not pulling and bunching the fabric up and then that breaks off
Yeah.
and then you have to flatten it out and then you're trying to follow that faint line.
So I just did exactly that. I made shrugs for the bridesmaids out of sheer fabric,
Mhm.
and I think I cut 2 of them by pulling the thread all the way across because it's a dark color. I thought that thread missing will leave that blank line. It's a really fine thread,
Oh,
which meant it really wasn't much of a line at all.
right.
And when I got to the 3rd one, I went, "This is not working for me," and I did exactly what you showed. It feels like it takes a little bit longer because you're pulling, cutting, but I did time it, and it took me significantly longer to pull an entire thread out, hope it didn't break, and yes, it did every single time,
Right.
then find that thread again. It was more efficient to just pull and cut because then when I got the thread out, I was actually done cutting at the same time,
Right,
so
right,
yeah,
right.
yeah.
And I think with students here, one of the things that's hard for them to learn is how to cut and slide your scissors.
Yes.
So that does take practice. So, you know,
Yes.
I do a lot of folding and cutting, you know, folding all my lining cuts and then
Yeah.
cut flat across with the scissors.
Yes.
And that is something that you have to practice to learn. And you find that sweet spot for your
Yes.
hand and your pair of scissors.
Yes.
So it's the same thing with pulling a thread. You just have to practice.
And it's a good reminder that your tools need to be in good shape because you need to have sharp scissors to
Yeah.
do that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So the next tip is drapery side hems with blackout lining. So I had a workroom friend that was making is new to making draperies, and
Mhm.
she had blackout draperies that did not have inner lining. So I have a how-to on my YouTube channel of how to sew blackout side hems with inner lining. But she didn't
Mhm.
have inner lining, and not everybody is going to ask for inner lining.
Right.
Recently on one of the Facebook groups, somebody says, you know, is inner lining your standard? And I kind of tongue in cheek said, well, following the work order is my standard.
Right.
Not always my choice whether we have inner lining or
Right.
not. I'm not calling those shots. So,
No.
but most often I do have inner lining. But so yeah, so let's look at doing drapery side hems. And this is for hand sewn so that the stitches don't show. So
Right.
there's 2 things that she needed to learn, and that was no pinholes of light
Mhm.
and sewing it. So, you know, it would have been easy to say, we'll just fold them over and glue them together, but that's not what we wanted to do. So,
Right.
and this is just on sample fabric, so it's not a real drapery.
Okay.
It's a practice piece. So the blackout lining is over into the side hem for a single fold. And I'm going to add some basting stitches or interlocking stitches.
Okay.
They're pretty far apart. They're about 4 or 5 inches apart. And this is in the crease that's on the leading edge.
Okay.
It's 3 inches over from the outside edge of the fabric. I'm taking a small stitch to the face, coming out, looping underneath the thread. And you don't want it to be pulled tight. This is just a securing stitch to hold the
Okay.
black lining to keep it from pulling away. And then you can fold over your side hem. So there's no inner lining under there.
Okay.
Just black out. And now the hand stitching. And this is going to be hand stitched. And it's pretty much the same way I hand stitch all draperies anyway, but a little more exaggerated, where you're stitching behind the side hem.
You're like tucking the stitch a little bit behind the side hem.
Exactly. Because
Okay.
that black outlining is folded over, you want your stitches to be behind that black outlining that folds over into the side hem.
Okay.
So it's a stitch into the blackout and out into the side hem and then out the crease. So I'm tucking the needle pretty far back behind the side hem, rocking it up into the side hem in this sort of
Right.
upside down backwards number 7. You can visualize
Are
that.
are you catching the face fabric, Susan?
Not every stitch.
Right.
You'll want to catch the face fabric. And I think I do show that. So I'm catching the black outlining with it behind the side hem and
Mhm.
then coming up and out through the crease.
Okay.
And it's almost exactly what I do for regular line draperies, except I don't force it underneath quite as much.
Right.
But it
And
makes
so
a big
now where it's going through the blackout, it's hidden by the additional fold in the hem.
exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. And a reminder, it's only the leading edges that matter. The one against the wall on the other side aren't such a big deal. So
Right.
there's my stitch to the face. If you want
Okay.
to do that, I like to do that about every 6 inches probably.
Okay.
And I don't have this pinned or clipped. You could put binder clips or quilting clips to hold the hem. So this, I'm just going to draw with a pencil here to show you the needle, path of the needle coming down and up. And then testing with my phone light there and no pinholes of light.
Right.
So
Oh, that's
yeah,
awesome.
yeah. And it goes pretty fast because you're
Yeah.
making generous large stitches. I like to use John James long darners number
Yeah,
7
they're my favorites.
and the Coats dual duty hand quilting thread and a matching color because you are making that little stitch to the front.
Right.
And I used a dark color on the video so that would show up.
Mhm.
So that was for Kelly. So I hope she's watching and can use that to practice. And then so the next one is making bias welt cord, which we do all the time. And this is something that's also takes practice. And everybody joins welt cord a little differently from the bias strips to where they meet. So I'm going
Yes.
to show you. And in classes, I show them at least 2 ways to join the welt cord together. But so let's look at this.
Okay. I'm really curious about this.
So here's the bias strips cut for the size needed for your welt cord and bring them over face to face with those cut edges right there together.
Mhm.
And you're going to make a right angle with the bias strips and leave a little V at the top. That's about a 1/2 inch seam allowance.
Mhm.
Now, a lot of people, and especially upholsterers, will bring that down further so it's more of a cross
Okay.
and then trim it off later. But I don't want to have to trim it off. So I have that fold at about a 1/2 inch. And that V at the top and that V at the bottom are telling you where to sew. It's like an
Yes,
arrow at the top and bottom.
it's my guideline.
Right, right. And then I'm going to put on a 1/4 inch welt cord foot. I'm going to stop this for a second because I have so many experienced workrooms that do not use welt cord feet. And I do not know why. Why would you use a zipper foot when there's this fabulous foot?
Agreed.
I mean, seriously, I cannot live without the 1/4 inch welt cord foot. If you're only going to have one welt cord foot for your walking foot or for your straight stitch, get the 1/4 inch welt cord foot. You will
Yes,
not regret it.
I
And
agree.
I've had students that have come to classes here that have been in business 20 years and they've never had a welt cord foot until they came to Workroom Tech and tried one. And
Okay.
I was like, you don't know what you don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I have strong opinions about the welt cord foot.
As you should.
But
Susan,
I'm like watching Instagram and these people are like sharing all their sewing videos. And I'm like, oh my God, they're using a zipper foot.
well, because and for me personally, anytime I ever used a zipper foot, I just couldn't get close enough. And then I was doing it 2 times or 3 times sometimes. And I remember one time being with Janelle Deck, and on her walking foot, she said, "Oh, I just use leave the welt cord foot
Yep.
on because we do so." And I was like, "Well, that's brilliant because it's not as easy to change the feet on a walking foot." And that's what I have on my machine 99.9% of the time. But on my straight stitch, I have a magnetic piece that's attached to my thread stand. And I have the feet that I use most often there, and the welt cord foot is there because I
Yeah.
do use it a lot.
Yeah. And I think a lot of it comes from if you have or are used to using a home sewing machine, a domestic machine, they don't have welt cord feet.
Right.
So not very many of them anyway that I know of. So if you're used to that and you're used to using a zipper foot and you think I'm good at that and that's fine, but you just don't know until you
Try it. Try it.
Once you try a trial makes a customer, right? Once you try the welt cord foot, you will not go back. I promise.
Right.
Okay, so I put the 1/4 inch welt cord foot on. And then it's a matter of covering the welt cord. My friend Jonathan Bennett says, put the hot dog in the bun. And every time I make welt cord now, I think of that. So you're putting the hot dog in the bun and bringing those cut edges together. And this, of course, was cut on the bias.
Okay. Do you stretch at all when you're sewing, Susan?
Not really. Let the foot do the work. The
Okay.
foot and the feed dog are doing the work for you. And it's so satisfying. And when you get to the seams, just finger press those open.
Perfect.
Yeah, love it. It's awesome. And then joining the welt cord pieces together, let's say on a pillow or a duvet, something like that. We have the 2 ends come together or a cushion. And this is a medium firm welt cord. I often use a soft welt cord.
Mm-hmm.
So you need to leave about 3 inches tails on each end and the threads. And I keep these nippers, they're tied to the sewing machine, so they're always there.
And they work well as seam rippers,
Yeah.
seam rippers, but thread cutters so that you
Yeah.
can really open your seams up pretty easily with those nippers.
And then I'm cutting off a little piece of the overlap because I'm using that as a guide. So you want to have the 2 pieces overlap the size of the welt cord cuts. So this was cut at 1 3/4, I think. So I could have measured over 1 3/4, but that's just if you have the extra there, you can use that as a guide. So now I'm cutting off the excess. So that little reference piece was there to show how much overlap. It's the size.
Gotcha.
Cut the welt cord.
Okay. I've never seen that before.
I think Sarah O'Neill, I think I learned that from her, but who knows where she learned it from? You know,
Yeah.
everybody has these little tips from their workrooms, and
But I love when I remember who I learned something from.
yes, right.
I
It
do
does.
enjoy
It makes
that.
it kind of special. I think of her every
Yeah.
time I do that. And bring those edges together. So I'm going to back that up because there's a little cue here that I forgot to do.
Yes.
Okay. So I have the two pieces. They're cut to overlap the size of the welt cord cut. Now I'm bringing the one furthest away from me and folding over on the bias and then laying the other one on top. And that makes sure I get it oriented correctly.
Okay.
And then you're going to sew from corner to corner on that, have that little triangle there from corner to corner.
So Susan, what you just showed actually just saved me a huge amount of time because I don't know whether I'm a little dyslexic or just sometimes it's a right left thing. I try to use this method, but sometimes I get disoriented when I pull
Me
it
too.
away to the side. So
Me
first of
too.
all, your guide for the length was a huge help, but just watching how you flip that top one up and orient it, I was like, I might get this right faster next
I
time.
have to do that because I get backwards in my
Yeah.
head, and I have
Okay.
to visually see that I'm doing it right. And always check it before you carry
Oh,
on.
always. Oh, that
And
is
again, finger
perfect.
press that open and then cut off the belt cord.
Okay.
And I kind of cut it on a little bit of a slant. And
I was just going to ask you that. I was actually taught to do that, cut each one at an angle so that if it's, I always worry about them being a little too short or,
yeah,
too long, where if you cut them at an angle, they'll kind of snug against each other.
and then you can finish. And you've got to have the welt cord foot to finish this last part.
Yes, of course you do. But you didn't change the welt cord foot to sew that little bit of,
No,
yeah,
no.
which I think might be a hang up for some people that they think they
Right.
have to change it out. You can still use it for some straight stitching.
Yeah, yeah. It works fine.
Well, that looks beautiful and there's no extra bulk and it's a seam. It's not the overlay if you have a bulky fabric.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just used not quite that method because now I understand it better, to do velvet on a welt cord because I couldn't do that fold
Right.
and have it
Right.
look nice. So
Right. So the next one is a funny little tip, but it's don't squeak and struggle.
all right, I can't wait to see this one.
The wheel on the right of your
Yeah.
machine, and you always want to turn it towards you.
Mhm.
And this is what we hear at Workroom Tech all day. I'm gonna turn my sound up. Okay, so to stop that, press the pedal. Just this. That's my tip.
Okay.
You're disengaging the brake. There's a little
Okay.
brake on the wheel, and you don't make the machine go. You just barely touch it with your foot. And
You can feel it disengage when you touch it. You'll know when to stop pressing on the pedal for that, for sure.
yeah. And if you have a new machine, practice it without any thread in the machine.
Yeah.
And you'll get the hang of it. And it's a hard thing to teach because it's like teaching somebody to drive a clutch in a car because you got to find that, the students are always going too far with their foot and
Right.
the machine goes and they jump back and they're scared. It's just this little, and I'm so used to doing it, I don't even think about it anymore.
Right.
It's just something I automatically do. So don't suffer through that. And that can't be good for the machine either,
No, no.
So the next one is what I call a runoff sewing technique. And that's You can't do it all the time, but when you can, when you're doing simple straight sewing, you just have this little scrap of fabric and you just sew off.
So what are the benefits of that, Susan? I've seen it. I have not really employed it, but why would I want to?
It saves thread because you're not pulling the thread out each time.
Oh, you're
And
right.
it saves time because you're not stopping, pulling the threads, flipping all those threads. So you have these little neat ends. And I'm just sewing scraps of fabric together.
Right.
Here, I'm not sewing anything particular. But when you're doing repetitive sewing, you just keep that little pat on the machine.
Right.
And
And
so,
as you finish a seam, it just stays there
right.
until the next. Oh, okay.
And it's kind of fun. Once you get in the habit
Ah,
of it.
yeah, yes.
And do this on your walking foot machine too. It's really, really a great way to sew fast and do some production sewing.
So I did see someone post a question about pulling threads to the back
Mhm.
recently on one of the Facebook groups. So this would avoid having to do that because it would be
Exactly.
attached to the piece of fabric. Um, I remember when I bought my home sewing machine, the woman who sold it to me was explaining to me there is a little thread cutter in the back and you
Mhm.
pull your thread up. And she said, and I didn't do that so much to cut my thread as I did to always know where my thread is. And
Yeah,
so when you would start the next seam, your thread was caught in the back, or
yeah,
not caught, but positioned in the back. So I never had to check where my thread was on the home sewing machine. And this is kind of the same idea.
yeah.
I like that one, Susan. I'm gonna start using that.
Yeah, I mean, you can't use it when, let's say I'm sewing a zipper, and I need to get that under the foot and, stop and start neatly
Right.
and things like that. But when you're doing repetitive sewing,
Yeah.
and also sewing off, if you're doing like tab top draperies and you have 32 tabs that you're sewing together, right? Just sew
Mhm.
them all in one row. When you're
Right, right.
don't sew an individual one and clip it. And when you're sewing welt cord strips together, like I just sewed, if you have 20 joins, just sew them all
Right,
or sewing them off all on one piece and then clipping the threads. It's
right.
such a time saver and it
Mhm.
saves on thread. And in the long
Yeah,
run, that costs us money. So
exactly.
time and money.
Yeah.
All right. So the last thing is a turret, which is a sewing machine attachment. I'm not
Okay.
recommending that people do this themselves. They might want to hire a professional sewing machine repair person. But so I'm not showing you every detail. I'm just showing you kind of how it happens. So I
Okay.
bought this from Sam Sloan at last year's Custom Workroom Conference. And here we are, September, and we're having another conference, and I never put it on a machine. So
Oops.
I'm so embarrassed to go back to his booth without actually putting it on the machine. So this is what a turret is. You can put 3 feet on at one time and then spin it
Oh,
around. So my 3 favorite feet, straight stitch, skinny foot, and the 1/4 inch welt cord foot. So to put this on, you have to take apart your machine. Um,
okay.
so you're taking out that rod that connects the bar that holds your press
Okay.
with a spring, and that puts that tension on your foot. So all of that has to come out carefully because it all has to go back. All right,
Here's
so
a
the
tip,
whole
put it
thing,
all in the order that it came out so that you know what order to put it back in.
and there's the part, you have to unscrew it because that big part isn't going to go through the machine.
Right.
And then replacing with that part.
Oh, wow. So when you buy this from Sam, it's the new um, piece that will go inside your machine as
Yes.
well as the piece that
Yes.
holds all 3 feet.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And there's the reason I was saying you might want to have a professional do this is there's getting the tension back to the correct tension with with the feet that's been around and getting the feet just right. Um,
Okay.
it's, you could screw up some things on your machine if you didn't know what you're doing, but I've been working on sewing machines my whole life. So, um, I'm pretty good. I did have to call Sam and go, what am I doing here? And he gave me a little tip and I was ready to go. And then you just spin it around to the foot that you want. And there's my welt cord foot. And
Wow.
now it does limit your lift. You can't lift as high because it's
Okay.
in the way. So I'm really lucky. I have multiple sewing machines. So this is the one that I have in my office studio workroom space. Um,
Okay.
so that students can see it, and I'll be using this on my projects, and I do mostly pillows. So that's why I have those 3 feet on and
Okay.
see how I like it. So
Okay.
I haven't been working with it long, but so far so good. It took me it's a little bit of adjusting to get
Right.
the tension right against the feed dogs.
Susan, I'm thinking that it might be a real benefit for any workroom that has more than one straight stitch machine, or if they have stations set up in their workroom and they do one kind of work at one place, because you're right. If the lift is affected by it, you might want to make sure that certain projects are not being done at that particular
Right,
machine.
right.
But a lot of us do have more than one machine.
Yeah.
So it might be a great time saver to have one set up with these feet.
Right. So for me, doing a lot of pillow work, this machine, it's perfect because I don't need the height I would if I was tacking pleats or sewing
Right,
cushions or, and this isn't available for a walking foot, obviously.
right.
So it's I'm new to it. And
Okay.
we resist change.
Yeah, we do.
So,
But I would be curious, we should do a follow-up on this and
mhm.
see how you like it after you've used it for a while.
Yeah, I mean it's different having all that stuff back there.
Yes.
It just feels weird, but
Yeah.
I'm getting used to it. I've been using it and so far so good.
Okay.
I wanted to
All right,
share.
I wanna hear follow-up on this. I'm very curious
Okay.
about it.
Well, that's all the tips I have for this 30 minutes with Workroom Tech.
Well, that was a lot of tips, Susan, and I learned a lot. I have a couple things I'm gonna try. I've seen the sew off done before. I just haven't tried it. But watching you do it, I'm like, maybe that is something I should be incorporating.
Yeah, and I forget to do that sometimes, and then when I do that sew off technique, I'm like, why don't I do this more often?
And I think there are things like that that once we start doing them and they become a habit. But I also think I was reading once about habits, like why is it so hard to develop new habits and so easy to drop them?
Right.
So
True.
it may be just folding up a little bit of fabric and leaving it next to the machine is the way to go to remind us to do it. So
Yeah, and keep it small because if you have a big piece, you're wasting a lot of thread.
yeah, right,
That's
right.
4 inches, it's about 2 inches, about a 2 inch
Yeah.
piece is fine.
And you can use the same piece for a while and then
Yeah,
just it also feels nice to be using something again, like a piece of scrap
yeah,
fabric. It's probably a piece that's in your trash can right next to your machine. So, yeah,
exactly.
perfect. All right, definitely gonna do that. And again, the serger thread, I did not realize I mean, yes, I have sewn without thread in the machine, but it's not a next step conclusion for me. When I'm changing the thread, I can just sew it off. It
Yeah,
just doesn't go there for me. So,
good. I'm glad
I
that
learned
helped.
something new.
Yay. It saves one person from saying bad words today. My job here is done.
Yes. This was
Okay.
fun, Susan. Thank you for sharing all those tips.
You're welcome.
I
Uh,
can't wait to hear, especially from people who've been around for a little while, if there's anything different that they've tried, and if people who are new try something new because of it. It's
yeah,
always great when you can learn something new.
great. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Thanks, Susan.
You're welcome. Bye.